thank you for joining me, your host, Tiffany, on the Birth and Rebirth podcast. And today we are in for a treat. This woman is incredible. Her name is Oyuny Hagin, and she shares her stories of birthing in the system and what that did to her and how it affected her choices moving forward. She also shares about loss as she experienced medical malpractice during her pregnancy, and all of that ultimately led her to where she is today, where she has discovered freedom in taking her family, her body, her life, her children's life into her hands and trusting God over the systems put in place to control us. And I just cannot speak highly enough about this woman and the wisdom that she carries and the faith that she has in God. And I'm just so excited for you guys to get into it and listen to these stories. So I'm going to stop, and I hope you all have a blessed day. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Oyuny, and I'm really honored to be here today with this beautiful woman. And she's giving me the opportunity to share my stories with you guys. And I just feel very excited to share the good news of what Freebirth is and my journey with that, with God, and through all that. So my name is Oyuny, and I was born in Mexico, Manzanillo, and it's a little place right along the coastline. So when I was born there, I remember being there. I was about 4 years old when my parents traveled up to the United States, and my mom's parents were already living in California, and we came to the Central Valley. And yeah, I remember living there, and I loved living there, and my dad would take us to the beach all the time, and I grew up around fresh seafood and all that. So I'm kind of like, beach girl. I really miss it over there. And so I grew up a little bit here in California, Central Valley, and then we moved to Las Vegas for about 9 years. And I lived most of my teenage life there, and then we came back over here to California when I was 16. So pretty much my whole life I grew up around violence. My parents were the household was just always very, it was just, everything had to do with whatever my mom and my dad were always going through. And I got to see a lot of violence. I got to see a lot of just arguing all the time. So my nervous system was very wrecked by the time I was a young adult. And I was 16, we came here, and my mom initially came over here trying to get help for me because I had started to get into drugs. But when I came here, I was doing better, and then all of a sudden I got into harder drugs when I was 17. And I was in my addiction for about, I want to say, I started at 14 with my first drug, alcohol and things like that. And then by the time I was 17, I was into pretty explicit, but I was like into heroin, and I was just like, really into this dark place.
Yeah.
And really it was because, I was trying to just not feel that just stress, and like my nerves always just going from the violence that I had witnessed and all those crazy things I had to go on with daily. And so I was in my addiction for a good, I want to say until up until my early 20s. I'm 29, and I got pregnant at 19. with my first child. And I always remember, I always yearned to be a mom. Like I always wanted to be a mom, and me and my mom didn't have a great relationship, so I would always be like, oh, I want to be a better mom than my mom. And so thankfully I stopped using while I was pregnant, and I tried to learn as much as I could about birth and pregnancy and childhood development, and there was a lot of resources around my town that they would, we would go to these classes and things like that. I was in rehab, and I was in like this pregnancy home. And well, it's like a home that had like pregnant women living there. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was staying clean and all that. And then I was trying to learn as much as I could. And there was this it's called, I don't I think it's called Nurse Family Partnership or something like that. And it was like nurse ladies that would come to your house, and they would teach you about like pregnancy and birth and all that. But obviously they would teach you like the normal stuff that everybody, like, oh, well, when you go
Yeah.
to the hospital, this is what they're gonna do to you. And I had no idea that I actually like had choices and all that. I just thought like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, well, I'm gonna go into birth and I'm gonna go into the hospital, and that's just what's gonna happen. And so fast forward, I went to labor with my son. um my water broke, and I was just like in a frenzy, and I was like, oh my god, it's like everything was like a panic, because that's like what we're taught, panic around
Yeah.
birth and stuff. And so I went into labor, and my husband and I were in rehab during that time. They allowed him to go to the hospital with me, but I was still very in obviously I was still in very maiden mindset, on top of the things that I experienced through childhood. I was always still trying to people please and like please my mother. And when she got there, she was just, I don't know, she was just like arguing, because I was trying to set my boundaries about like, I don't want to go to the hospital after the baby's born. I just want to have my space. And it was just like, it was yeah, it was the worst. And so my mom, I had to get her taken out of the room. And then the next morning, she came still unannounced, and just like invading my space, and like just still being very condescending to me. And so I birthed my baby. I had an episiotomy, because it's my first baby, and they're like, oh, you need to be cut, because I don't know. There was the, what is it called, the students. So they had
Mm-hmm.
students do my birth. Like I signed papers and stuff, when you sign papers and things like that. And they were like, do you want students in your room? And I was like, yeah, sure. I don't know what that even means. And so it was a student. So obviously, he's going to practice episiotomy. And so I got cut, and they made me hold my baby halfway out. Like his head was already halfway out. And I'm sitting there, laying there. I remember this, just him like being halfway out and holding him. And then they're like, okay, wait, don't push. And that was very traumatic. And then years later, we found out that he had like a neck injury, and because of the compressing, holding him there, and
Yeah.
my uterus still trying to push him out. And so right
Yeah.
now we go to chiropractor all the time for him. And so that happened, and my baby, obviously was, cut cord, taken right to the warmer, and he was wrapped up. By the time I got up off the bed to be able to even see my baby, they handed him to my mom first. And so I was just, yeah, I just didn't feel right. I'm like, everything was just kind of just happening around me. I wasn't really even part of my birth. And so that was
Mm.
my first experience. I was 19, and breastfeeding was horrible after that. I had mastitis, and it was just really hard, a lot of emotional trauma going on. And but I was able to get through that, and I still breastfed my baby. So that was a good thing. And so then I went on to have my second child, which was my daughter. And that was, I want to say, 2 years, 2.5 years after my first birth. And it was almost the same thing, but this time, I had a birth plan and things like that, and I started to kind of like realize that I had like a little bit of choices here and there. And then, but still, then I saw how they didn't even care about it. And the doctor that I had, he was very adamant about like, because I actually asked for the epidural, and he violated my right to actually have one. He was like, no, no, you're just gonna, I wasn't even prepared for the pain or just anything. And I felt like it doesn't matter which way you go, you're still violated. So I
So
had
did you
my
have an
daughter.
epidural with your
No, I
first?
I didn't.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, with my
Okay.
first I did. Yeah, yeah. So with my
Okay.
first I did, and then with my second I didn't, but it wasn't out of choice. It was just the doctor was like, which I mean, in a sense, I was like, oh wow, I healed faster without the epidural. But still, like, I was like, why did he just like push me off? Like whatever. He just kept delaying. He was like, well, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. And I'm just like in pain, like screaming. I wasn't ready for that. I didn't want that. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was just
Yeah,
like,
you didn't mentally prepare for it either, so
yeah,
it's
yeah. And so
totally
then,
violating.
yeah. And so then I had to call my mom because I felt like, I don't know, I felt like I like owed her like an apology for the last birth. And I was like, yeah, you should be here. And when she got there, it was just like, I knew I had made a mistake. She was all in my ear, like screaming at me to push. And everybody was like, push, push, did the coach push? And I'm like, I am pushing. Like I hated that so much. And then,
Mm-hmm.
so I had my daughter, and so then that was that. And I still felt like something wasn't right. I was like, why is it like this? I don't understand. Like, anyways, so years, passed by. My husband and I, we were still on our recovery journey for a while. And then finally, we started getting our life together a little bit more. And it then came 2020, and I was
Mm-hmm.
pregnant with my third child. And by the time that I was giving birth, it was late March. So um this was like right before everything hit, right before the whole hospital
Yeah.
thing of not letting partners in. So I was fortunate that I didn't experience that.
Yeah.
It was still pretty kind of normal in the hospitals. So but I was trying to like still, like I was like trying to prepare my husband, like, oh, I want you to be supportive this time. I want to do it again I want to try again without an epidural. Um, but for some reason, like we got there, my water broke, we got there, and by the time I was like feeling the pains, my husband was so tired, and I was like, you know what, I'm not doing this. I don't really even want to try. And so I asked for the epidural. And this time I did ask for delayed cord clamping, but they only allowed me 10 minutes. And then I asked for the golden hour, they call it, where they let you
Mm-hmm.
keep your baby with you. And I just remember that hour feeling so good. Like I had my baby on, I had my baby with me. Everybody kind of just left me alone. They left the room as soon as the baby was born. Like they cut the cord, and I didn't let them take her from me. And I just remember feeling so good. Like I was like, oh my God, I can just lay here with my baby. And that did something to me. I was like, I don't ever want like that whole frenzy thing again. And so it still, the birth part was just not it, because as soon as I changed my choices about wanting epidural, the nurse that was attending to me, like her whole attitude changed right after. I was like, oh, I want the epidural. It just kind of all changed. So I was still like, experiencing some kind of something during my births. And so that didn't feel right either. And so anyways, we went home earlier than normal because I was like, I don't want to be here. I asked them to go home, and they let me go home early, which was nice. So I started to kind of wake up a little bit more about like, oh, I could actually do more than what I think. And
Mm-hmm.
so then we I want to say, so my daughter was born March 2020, and then I think I got pregnant around the next summer. And I was pregnant. I was about like 15 weeks, and I was going to the prenatals and things like that. And then like all of a sudden I got these major headaches. And we were in between moving, so it was really stressful. And I just remember I felt like my body was just not, it wasn't handling things very well. And I was also trying to be vegan. And so that was hard on my body because I wasn't nourishing
Mm,
myself correctly. Like, I feel like, you want to be vegan, that's fine, but like I wasn't doing it to where like I was like extremely changing my diet, especially during like pregnancy. It was really extreme. I shouldn't have
yeah.
well, I didn't know any better. I was just trying to, because during 2020 there was just this like, I don't know what was happening, but everybody was like, my feed was just full of like this and that's poison or this and that's happening. Like everybody
Fear.
all of a sudden like, in the air about
Yeah.
what's good for you and what's not. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, so then I was getting these major headaches, but I know now that that was attributed to being deficient on my vitamins and my minerals. And I felt that in my intuition. I was like, I feel like I'm probably deficient in something. My body was telling me that. And I was telling the OB, and he was just like, no, you're fine. It's just pregnancy. Well, I go to the hospital, to the local ER here, and I just wanted them to check my baby. I didn't want anything from them. I just was like, I'm here because I have these headaches and I just want to make sure my baby's fine. Well, they had me in the hallway, and we live in a really small town, so that's the only hospital we have. And yeah, it's everybody goes there, and it's not a very good hospital. So we went, um, well, I went by myself actually. And then the doctor was like, hey, do you want this headache cocktail that we give to everyone that usually has migraines? And I was like, and he's like, we don't usually give it to pregnant women. There's no studies on if it's good for them or not, but usually it's fine. And I was like, well, you're the doctor, I was like, if you think it's okay, then, why not? Because my headache was really bad. It was like where I would like lean over, and it's like pressure headaches. And so, but then I was like, wait, can you ask the doctor? I told the nurse, it was a male nurse. I was like, can you ask the doctor if I can see, you guys can do the sonogram before you give me the medicine through IV? And he went and asked the doctor. The doctor said no. And I was like, okay, and something didn't feel right about that. And then as soon as the medicine went into my body, I could feel, because I have done IV drugs, I could feel the way it hit my body was too much for me. And so I was just like, felt all warm, and I was just like, oh no, like this is not okay. And it was a cocktail mix of this medicine called Reglan with Benadryl. And as soon as it hit my body, I was just like, this doesn't feel right. And then I started to panic. I started to have like a doom, like feeling like I was gonna die. And then
Um,
um, I was like, can you stop this, please? I was like, I don't feel good. I don't feel good. Like I feel like I'm gonna die, and I started to panic. And then I was like, just stop the medicine. And then he had to go get the doctor, and then they stopped it. And um, he was like, oh, you're just having a what is it, adverse reaction. It only happens 1 in 3, whatever number he said. And I was just like, okay. I was like, do you have an antidote? I was like, do you have an antidote? Because I wanted to rip off the thing and just like
yeah.
run. Like I felt like I was literally gonna die. And then I was just like, oh my God. Like I just remember looking down. I was like, if I'm feeling like this, my baby. And at that moment, like I kid you not, I felt my baby soul leave my body. And it's like really hard to even like explain that to anyone, but I felt that, like that's what I felt. And I was just like, no.
Oh,
And at that moment, I couldn't process what was actually happening, but it was, but I knew that's what I felt. And I was like, oh no. Like, and then as soon as I felt that, my body started shaking, my legs started shaking, my body started shaking, um uncontrollably. And then the doctor was like, well, we're just gonna let the medicine run a little bit more so that it could calm you down, the Benadryl can calm you down. And by then I was catatonic. Like I was just like, I fell asleep. And I was trapped inside my body. I knew I was aware, like I knew I was aware of everything around me, but I couldn't move, I couldn't talk, I couldn't even reach my phone to call my husband or anything. So I had to experience that all by myself. Um,
Oh my
and it was horrible. It was the
goodness.
worst thing that I ever experienced in my life. And for me, I never wanted to experience that again. And then they took me to the sonogram room, and when the lady came to take me, I was I was basically asleep. She had to drag me onto the wheelchair, took me to the sonogram. I didn't even remember I went there. And then she came and slid me back into the chair. And mind you, I was like in a hallway. I wasn't like even in a room. And that hospital gets really full because it's the only hospital here in this little town. And an hour later, when I'm like kind of waking up, the doctor comes back and he's like, I have good news and bad news, or I don't know what he said. And I was just like, okay. And I was still really high off the drugs. I felt like I was like in like a floating. And then he's like, well,
Mm.
we didn't find a heartbeat. And like in that moment, I knew that it was the medicine that had killed my child. Like I knew. And then they started the frenzy about trying to prove to me that my baby must have already been dead because my headaches. And then they tried to pull up my blood test about my HCG and whatnot. And they called the OB that I was seeing. And this OB, he sees most of the patients here in this town. And he thankfully was really sweet during that time, but usually he's kind of weird. There's a lot of stories that go on with him about just being very inappropriate with women, and I've experienced the same. And so, anyways, he came and I was like, yeah, they're telling me about my HCG and all this stuff. He's like, that doesn't matter. Your HCG doesn't matter. He's like, what's going on? I was like, they gave me a drug. And then he was like, why would they do that? And I was just like, I don't know. I told them I wanted a sonogram and they didn't listen to me. Soon as the ER doctor came along and told him what happened, the OB changed his whole tone and he was just like, oh, well, yeah, it's probably was already, your baby was probably already gone, whatever. And I was just like, at that moment, I realized like, they don't give a shit about me. They give a shit about
Yeah.
themselves and about,
And this is a cover up. And this is a
yeah.
cover up
And
scheme.
they even, the ER doctor took me back to this room where, he was trying to show me the sonogram and he's like, look, there's no blood flow. And I'm like, what am I even looking at? Like, I don't know. That doesn't prove anything to me. And so, anyways,
Disgusting.
they took me out of there within 30 minutes of the calling the OB. It's like I could tell they were trying to just rush me out of there. I was still all high on the drugs and they were just trying to rush me out. And then, and then the OB was like, well, and it was like, I just received the news that my baby died and you guys are already asking me if I want a DNC. The ER doctor was like, well, do you want a pill or do you want to stay and we can do a DNC for the remains? Like, my baby's not a baby no more. It's just remains now. And that broke my heart. And I'm just like, I'm not going to do that. I just want to go home. And I was scared. I was like, was this even safe, to have a dead baby inside me? I don't know. And the OB was like, yeah, it's fine. Um, here's my number. He gave me his cell phone and he's like, call me when you start to, bleed or have symptoms. I was like, okay. And we were staying in a hotel during this time because I was transitioning from one home to the other. So all this was happening, I didn't even have a home. Hadn't even found a home yet. So I went back to the hotel and it was like all this trauma within like hours. And I hadn't even seen my husband. I called my mom and I called him on the phone and they were all confused. They're like, what the hell? Like, what do you mean? And it was all just so confusing. And I was like, what the hell is happening? So all of a sudden, 3 days later, I start to bleed. And I'm like, what a coincidence that 3 days later, I start to bleed. Why didn't it happen before? Usually when an incident happens, it's usually after 3 days that,
Yeah.
you see signs of things. So I just knew in my heart. And at this time, I was just, so God's always been in my life. I've always seen God protecting me. I grew up in a Jehovah's Witness home. So
Mm.
that was very traumatic for me. And uh it didn't push me away from God, but it pushed me away from like wanting to be super close to him, and I would still question him a lot about everything. And during this time, I was closer to God. I was closer to him, but at this time I was just like, God, like please don't let me slip, because I almost ended up going insane. Like I was having crazy thoughts, and I was like, oh my God, like the aliens are doing this to me. Like it was just like my brain was like on the edge of like going psychotic. And something happened. I was just like, God, like just please help me not go insane right now. Like, and then 2 days later, the landlord I had been calling was like, I have a house for you, you know. I was like, okay. So God was like, I got your back, you know, you just do your part, and I got your back on all this other stuff. And we got a home. So when I started to bleed 3 days after, I went to the hospital right away. I had never, you know, had a miscarriage like that or anything like that. So it was very scary for me. And obviously, you know, they tell you like, oh, well, it's dangerous if you do it at home, and, you know, placenta retention and all these things. So I went, and it was obviously horrible. I was there for 3 days. They're putting Cytotec, the pill inside my cervix for like 3 days. And then finally, baby came, and he was so small. And I thought I was gonna be scared of seeing him, but I fell in love with him just like I fell in love with all my other children when I saw them, you know?
Mm.
And I couldn't keep my eyes off him, and I was there with him for about 8 hours until his body started deteriorating. So I was just like, you know, just you can go ahead and take him now. And but they treated him like a spectacle. All the nurses were just like treating him like a spectacle, you know. It was just really weird. I didn't like it. And
How
when it
far
came
along
time,
were you?
I was 15 weeks. So I
Mm.
was almost 20. And so he was like the size of my palm. And
Yeah.
it was, yeah. And he was a boy. And so that broke our heart even more, because I remember we wanted a boy during that time. And so when it was time to deliver the placenta, it was even more horrible, because the doctor was going in there with like clamps and, you know, ripping stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
It was horrible. And my husband had nightmares because he was watching. And just even then, like I was being told to push, and I was like, I feel like I'm gonna pass out. And the nurse was like, you're not gonna pass out, just push. And I was just like it doesn't matter what, you're just always being disrespected and just talked to. And I'm
Yeah.
just, you know, I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so fucking tired of this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I was able to grieve for a while. You know, I came to this house, and this house was a blessing. This house was like just, and it was exactly what I had prayed to God for. I was like, God, I don't care if the house is ugly. I just want a big backyard and a tree for my kids. And that's
Mm.
exactly what he gave me, you know, because there was this other house I was supposed to get, and it didn't go through it, but it didn't have a yard on what I asked for. And that's how I knew like God really does listen to you, you know, and if you humbly
Yeah.
ask, he'll always give to you. And so I came,
Mm.
and there was a
Amen.
tree in the back, and that tree became my best friend. And I would always go out there with her, and she helped me grieve through my son. And then I got pregnant again, with my last child. She's going to be 2 now in March. So I have all my babies are March except my second child. I don't know why, but it just happens like that. And so I got pregnant, and obviously, you know, all the fears came right away about like, you know, what if, you know, just worrying, you know, worrying about the baby dying. And so I started to kind of, I don't know what happened, but it was Instagram that helped me find the answers I needed. I was trying to look, so I was looking for a midwife first. And then we're in a small town, so there's not a lot of licensed midwives here. Um, and so I was just like, man, like I can't afford a midwife. This Medi-Cal all of a sudden is starting to pay for a midwife, which is the insurance that everybody has here in California. But it was fairly new, so there wasn't any midwives that were taking the insurance. And so that was a blessing in disguise after I learned about all that. And
Mm-hmm.
then, yeah, and so then I just remember stumbling upon this woman. I seen her giving birth in her, like, a little kiddie pool. And then I saw that, and then I saw Freebirth Society, and I'm like, what is Freebirth? And then I don't know, it just all kind of just started coming through, because had been praying. I was like, God, like, I don't want to ever go back there. I don't want to experience that ever again. Like, please give me, I don't know, like,
And
and
an
so,
alternative.
yeah, something. I was like, and so I saw Freebirth Society, and then I saw the word unassisted birth. And I remember my husband, me and him, uh, he's very, I don't even know how to explain it, but my husband's very free-minded person. He's always been against, like, the whole, um, I don't want the government telling me what to do kind of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so he was always like, oh yeah, well, we should just have our babies at home. And he was ready for that since, like, way back. But I was just like, what? No, like, we can't have our baby at home like that. Like, that's insane. Isn't that illegal? And so,
I
anyways, I
love
looked up.
that.
Yeah,
That's so not what you normally hear. It's usually the opposite.
yeah, yeah. So it was like, he was just listening. My husband he's such a blessing. He's such a good listener. I'm always talking about my ideas and what I want to do. And he just listens and supports me, like, yeah, yeah. And so when I
Beautiful.
looked up, I was like, babe, should we just have our baby at home? Like, just have our baby? What do you think about that? And he's like, yeah, yeah, like, let's do it. I've been ready. And then, but at that time, I still didn't know that unassisted birth wasn't illegal. But then a few days after, I looked it up, and it said, that it's not illegal to have your baby unassisted at home without a medical person, whatever. And that was it. Like, that's all I needed. I was like, that's it. It's over. I don't need to, you know. And so then, but then after, obviously, I worked through a lot of my fears about, what if this or that happens. The normal fears that we all have about, like, hemorrhaging, or like,
Yeah.
things like that. And so I started to listen to the Freebirth Society podcast, because I couldn't afford their um their courses. But either way, there's a lot of free knowledge out there. You know what I mean? And I didn't let that stop me. And I love them for everything they share and all the work they do. And the podcast really is just amazing medicine. Like, I was
Yeah, it
I was eating
is.
up their podcast, and I only listened, I want to say, to like 3 or 4. And so I was listening to them, and just beautiful, powerful stories. And then I started diving into doing my work about, like, okay, so they have the newborn screening test in California, like, legal stuff. I was like, well, what do I do about that? Do I have to do that? And so then I was, like, just on the phone calling the programs, because if you look on Google, they just tell you, oh, well, they don't give you the answer you want. They just kind of tell you, oh, well, you should do this because it's good for you. And it's
Exactly.
not like, that's not the answer I want. Do I have to do it or not? And so I called the program. The lady was like, no, you can deny it for the religious purposes. And I just did all my homework on the legal stuff, because I was like, if CPS or something, I want to be ready, and I want to know my rights. And
Amen.
so, yeah, so because I had dealt with them before in my addiction with my son, and I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. Um, I have a lot of friends that are in that realm. Well, I don't want to say they're my friends, but, like, people in recovery and meetings that I used to go to and stuff like that. So I was like, yeah, people are gonna know about me free birthing. I'm not gonna just risk it and not know my rights and things.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a deep dive in that. And after a while, I stopped going to the OB, because I started to learn about how the interventions start there. And then, yeah, I just kind of fell into peace with it all, towards the last, I want to say, like, 5 months. And I was just soaking it all in. And I was just like, we're doing this, we're having a baby. And it wasn't really a big deal. It was just like, we're just going to have our baby. And so then, it was March 20th. It was 8 in the morning, and my son, his birthday is on the 24th. So my husband had bought tickets for us to go to the aquarium, and we were getting ready to go to the aquarium. And I woke up in the morning, I stood up, and I felt I felt a little pop, and I was like, oh no, I'm gonna ruin the day today. And the kids, I was like, okay, kids, hold on, let me make sure it's not my water, because if not, we're gonna end up having a baby at the aquarium, and we don't want that. And they were kind of sad, and they were like hoping that it wasn't. And I was still just like, we'll still go, it's not like I was still like, I wasn't worried. But then I was like, no, because it's a long ride. It's 2 hours from here. It was in a close to San Francisco. So I didn't want to risk it. And I was like, no, I was like, oh, I could just put a diaper out, like use my diapers and just like go. But so it did end up being my water. And after that, I was really excited. We were all excited. The kids were obviously kind of bummed that it wasn't aquarium day anymore. But and it was funny because we were joking about it the night before. We were like, what if the baby's born tomorrow and we can't go to the aquarium? They're like, oh, the baby, party pooper baby. But it was so funny. And so yeah, the whole day, um, really I just relaxed in bed. I wasn't like doing anything to try to amp anything up. I was relaxed. I ate. I was like, oh my God, I'm so hungry. Um and I just kept thinking to myself, man, if I was over there in the hospital right now, I wouldn't be able to eat nothing. And that's one of my favorite parts. I ate so much. My sister
Yep.
ordered me Denny's, and I ate the whole Denny's by myself. And it was so good. I was eating, I don't even know, I ate a bunch of stuff. And so that was around 8 in the morning when my water had broke. And so I was relaxing all day. And I felt consistent contractions after a couple hours. Um, but they weren't like unbearable or anything like that. And then came like I want to say 10 p.m. and my labor stopped. And I just remember hearing a lot of stories of a lot of women talk about how their labor stops, and I was like, oh, well, that's normal now. Like now that I know so much and hear so many stories, that's normal. You just rest through that. It's not like
Yeah.
a thing you need to panic about. And so
Yeah.
I rested, and I was like, well, I'm gonna try to go to sleep for a couple hours. And by 1 in the morning, I couldn't fall asleep anymore. The surges were coming pretty strong. And so I woke up my husband, and I was like, can you fix everything up for me? Because I had bought a little kiddie pool, and I was wanting like blankets in it. But by this time I couldn't get comfortable anywhere. I was just kind of just trying to find a spot to lay in, or and we were in the living room, and my husband, he just had his anime on, and he was like, poor thing, he was like halfway asleep, trying to be there for me. And all he really did through the whole time was just really just be there. And um sometimes I would try to hold on to him, but it just was not working out. And I was in and out of the bathtub, I was feeling it. And so then when I was deep in the transition, I was in another world, and I was in the bath, and I had my headphones on, and I had music on, and I started crying. There's a point where you get just emotional, like just the emotions are just flowing, like it's very
Mm.
psychedelic experience.
Yeah.
And I was talking to God, and I was just like, and my son was there, like his presence was there. And I remember just crying, like remembering why I'm doing this. And I was like, I'm doing this because I'm finishing what I didn't get to finish with my son, what was taken away from me. I'm doing this
Mm.
to finish it for him, and bringing his sister into this world the right way, the way he would have wanted to be brought into the world. And so I
Mm.
just remember I was just very emotional. I was just like, just remembering, and God was there with me. And their presence was just there with me, just telling me like, we're here. And so I got out of the bathtub, and by then I was on the toilet, and I was just like, very loud. And my husband was like, you okay, babe? And I couldn't talk anymore. So I went back into the bath, and then he comes in, and he had his watch, and he's like, tell me when you get another one, which we didn't really care to time the contractions or anything like that. But he just wanted to know, like, how often they were happening. before he could even, time the next one, I had already had another one. So they were coming, I guess, a minute apart. And by the time that he saw that they were coming one after the next, I was just I was on my knees in the bathtub. My knees were in the bathtub and then my arms were out of the bathtub. So I was like hanging out of it. And I was like, I think she's coming out because I felt a boulder just coming out of me. And obviously, when we're in hospitals, like we don't feel everything because, there's always someone or something that you're looking at or paying attention to. And at this point, I was like completely in my body. Like I felt everything. So it felt like a boulder was just like coming out of me. And all my breath was just like, felt like it had gone. And for a minute there, I panicked and my husband was looking behind me. And I was like panicked because I felt like my breath had been gone. And I was like, call the ambulance. And he was all like, in his most like grounding, like husband, fatherly voice, he was like, no, you can do it. And that moment, I was like, yes,
Wow.
yeah, like, I can do it. Like, what the hell are the ambulance gonna really do? And there were quick thoughts coming in my head. And I was
But
just
I
like,
love how he handled that.
yeah, he was just like, no, you can
That's
do it. And
impressive.
yeah, and so my husband and we've had a lot of journeys together, like psychedelic journeys together, and journeys where like I'm like, I can't do this, and he's just like, no, you like, we're okay, you can do this. So he's been a
Yeah.
very healing part of my child trauma where I feel incapable or I'm told that I can't. And so at
Hmm.
that moment, that unraveled all that. And so I was like, yeah, I can do it. And then her head came out and I took a breath. I was just kind of relaxing through that. I was like, okay, her head is out. And so then the rest of her body came out and it felt really weird because she came out normal. Nobody was over there like turning her over or whatever. So
Yeah.
she came out completely sideways. And that felt really odd. But she came out and then the kids had woken up when her head was coming out and they came out and their eyes were all like, what's happening? They thought it was so funny. We laugh about it now. They thought I had diarrhea. They're like, we thought you had diarrhea or something, mom, because you're all
Aw,
screaming. And then they
so
came
cute.
in and they were all they were just observing. They were like halfway asleep and they're like, what the heck? And the baby, she was out. And my husband, because the water was like halfway in the bathtub and when her head was out, her head was kind of bobbing in and out of the bathtub and he was like, babe, is this supposed to happen? But I couldn't talk. I was just like, and he's like, okay, I'm just gonna take the water out. And so when she came out, all the water was mostly gone and he picked her up. And then I was like, wait, the cord. And it was so funny how like it's just so like people think that you don't know what you're gonna do, like, oh, that you're not gonna know, but it's just so innate. I was just like, the
Yeah.
cord. So I grabbed, I was like, because I didn't want him to like snap it or something, and so he's like, oh shoot, yeah, because he didn't even think like that there was even a cord. He forgot all about that, and then
Yeah.
so he handed her to me, and I was like, I had told him where everything was, but you know how it is. You tell your husband, babe, all the stuff's right there, and then all of a sudden they forget. And he was just like looking everywhere. He's like, "Where's the stuff?" I'm like, "Over there in the white basket." And he was like, "Where?" And anyways, it was just so beautiful seeing him like in this like primal, like just being a husband and a
Yeah.
dad. And he was just like,
Provider. Yeah.
yeah, and he was getting the bed ready. And so then I pulled myself up from the tub and I walked to the bed and he had the bed ready and everything. And we're all just laying there together looking at her. And yeah, I was just relaxing. I wasn't worried about the placenta coming or anything like that. I knew that it would come in its own time. And we wanted to do like a cord burning ceremony, but those after pains were just, I was just over it. I wanted it to kind of just be over. And but I
Yeah.
kept trying to go back and forth to the bathroom with the baby holding her. And it was getting hard. For like an hour, I just laid in bed. And then after an hour, like my placenta was wanting to come out and I was just like not I was not having it. And so then I
Yeah.
just we tried to burn the cord while the placenta was still inside me, because the cord was already white, and I was just kind of over it. But then like it wasn't burning right, so I was like, let's just cut it. And I had bought like uh a little kit online, and it was like what,
Mm-hmm.
$15, and it had the, the, what is it, scalpel and everything. So we had cut it, and I had already seen like YouTube videos how to do it myself. So we did that, and then as soon as I cut the cord, it was amazing the feeling I felt. Like it was like, you think that you don't feel these things, but we felt it. Like I felt it, and I know the baby did too, because when we cut it, her eyes opened wide, and then I felt like this like feeling of like like a relief feeling. And I think that was
Mm.
just my placenta feeling like, okay, baby's fine, baby's good. And I know my placenta was listening to me, because I had told her the whole time during pregnancy and during birth, I was like, please keep my baby safe until, we know baby's earth side. So I think that's why she was holding on until she knew, like, okay, well, baby's cut, I can come out now. So I went to the toilet, and I was just talking to her, and I was just like, okay, the baby's safe now, you can come out. And bam, as soon as I said that, she came out. I had put a bowl in the toilet, and she came out. And then I just felt so relieved. I went back to my bed, was holding the baby, and then my husband took care of my placenta. He like bagged her up for me and everything. I had hired a doula, a lady that she does like encapsulation. So she came like a couple hours after, or I think it was the next day, I don't remember. And then she took it, and she did like an imprint on one of like a canvas that I had bought. And yeah, and then after that, like now I know how to prepare placenta by myself, so I won't be needing that. But I tried the capsules, and they were good for a while. I didn't start eating them till like a couple weeks after, because I felt so good from having my birth. Like I felt, I don't even know who I was. I was just like I was a completely different person. Like I was just in like, wow, I had so much energy. My mom and my
Mm.
sister came to see the baby like a couple hours after. They took the kids for the day so we could rest. And yeah, like I have never ever felt so good, and I wanted to do it again immediately, And I was just
Mm.
like, this is what birth is supposed to be like. This is it. I'm like, nobody's telling me what to do, nobody's telling me anything. And it was
Yeah.
just amazing. It was beautiful. And the only thing that so obviously through time it's like still working on this fear or that fear, and I was still working on trusting my mother instincts. And my baby was born with like a little hole next to her ear, and I was worried about it. But the next day I was like, I asked my husband, I was like, should we take her to get it checked or not? I don't want to deal with them. But he's like, yeah, well, we could just take her to get it checked if you want, or if you don't want to, it's fine. He wasn't really worried about it. But we went to the children's hospital that was 2 hours away from us. And I wasn't scared. I was like, I had a planned unassisted birth. I'm not here for anything else. I just want the doctor to look at that little hole in her ear. And obviously the nurses and stuff were being really weird. They're like, oh, like you need the newborn screening within 48 hours, and you need the vitamin K shot and this and that. And I'm like, I don't want any of that. And so the doctor came in, and he was really nice, and he's like, you actually don't really need the K shot. He was like, we have to recommend it obviously, but you're fine, your baby's fine. That little hole next to your ear is very normal. It's just like an extra uh what's it called, sinus or something like that. He's like, usually it doesn't cause problems for people. And that was it. And we went home. And for the newborn screening, I don't know if they do it in your state, but it's like a little prick on the foot, and
Mm-hmm.
they like
Yeah.
take blood and stuff at the hospital. And so I was still working through fears with that. And then I was like, oh, well, usually if they have that little hole, that might mean that they have like some kind of something. And I don't know. I was just like very still not very in tune with
You were still
my,
breaking through
yeah,
from
I
the
was still break, yeah.
conditioning.
Yeah, and so I went and I went to the pediatrician that I knew wasn't gonna be annoying to me about stuff, and he gave me the prescription. But and I did it like a month later because I had been battling with should I do it or not, which was like really pointless to do it a month later. But I went and I got it done. And then after that, I learned what they do with our baby's blood and stuff because I was looking through their like through their guidelines and whatnot. And I was like, what the hell? Why do I want my baby's blood to be used for tests and crap like that? And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not doing that ever again. And so yeah, then that was it. And then integration was just happening and my life is completely different. I don't know. I don't feel the need to um seek God through any other measure except just prayer. Um and like it changed my life and I was just like, well, no wonder they don't want us birthing like this. Why would they want us to know how powerful we are and that we are the ones that
Yeah.
should be making the choices? I realized like, wow, like I'm not even really even being a mother. I wasn't even really being a mother because I had the schools making the choices. I had the pediatricians making the choices. I had everybody else making the choices for me and my child except me. And now,
Hmm.
like, it's like my kids are homeschooled. I make the choices and I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of anyone and their opinions or like even the law does, they don't even know the law. And I'm like, I have God given rights. I don't need your permission for anything. And so with this pregnancy, I'm very at peace. I haven't had the need or the fear to like not even the thoughts come up like, oh, what if this happens or that. I'm just pregnant and I'm gonna give birth and that's it.
Yeah.
But,
So you're pregnant right now,
yeah.
and so this is a completely like out of the system experience so far. So
Hmm.
it's like over time, like you gradually have gotten like more and more removed from like, the system essentially.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
does it feel being pregnant and not having any of that, confirmation from the medical system, the sonograms and the testing and all of that? How are you working through the fears and just like really deprogramming essentially?
Yeah. So it feels very peaceful and it feels very I feel really good that I'll know because like if I need outside tools that I don't have, I know that I'll know because God made my body and if God
Mm.
is telling me something, then if my body's telling me something, that's God telling me something because God made me and my
Mm-hmm.
body and my baby. So,
Mm-hmm.
I really that's it may sound like cuckoo to other people, but it's like really like we're not just flesh, we have spirit in us and we have life
Yeah.
in our soul. Like, have you ever, they're like, well, how will you know? Well, have you ever felt like a bad gut feeling? It's kind of like that.
Yeah,
So it's like almost people like
exactly.
as soon as they hear about God, they just like discredit it, like, oh, you're crazy. Like, no, like, what do you mean? You have instincts yourself. You follow your
Yeah.
gut. So,
Well,
um, I in the beginning of this pregnancy, I got sick for about 3 days. I had a high fever and no other symptoms. And so I was like, well, let me go check just in case, because I guess that is one of the symptoms, if your baby did like die inside you or something like that. So I was like, let me go check just to make sure. And they did a quick sonogram and they're like, baby's fine. I was like, okay. And then the next day I had more symptoms. So I ended up having the flu. And it was just funny to me. And I was like, yeah, well, at least I made that decision consciously. It wasn't like something fear based or anything like that. And then a couple weeks later, I I was feeling liquid coming out, and it was like at least a couple times a day, and I was like, I wonder if that's amniotic fluid. And then I was like thinking, well, if it is, then it is. But I'm like, I kind of want to know, but then I was like, I don't want to go to the hospital. And I have this friend that she took the RBK school for Freebirth Society, so we became really
Mm-hmm.
close friends because our views are very similar. And so I called her and we kind of just talked about it, and she's like, "Well, you could like buy strips on Amazon." Um, and like she was a nurse for a lot of years in the system, so she was like, "They're not gonna tell you how broken the sac is if it is. They're not gonna tell you very much." And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I was just trying to see if I could know or not. And then I just prayed about it. And then I had ordered the strips on Amazon, but my card declined. And so that was like God telling me, like, just trust. And then I was like,
Yeah.
I didn't even want to, I was just like, okay, well, you know what? Oh, my dog scared me. And I was like, you know what? That's when I had that realization, like, well, if if my body tells me more, then that's God telling me, you know.
Exactly.
So I'll know if something is. And so I'm very comfortable with even the notion of like, well, if this is a miscarriage, like it's okay. I'm not gonna force something that, I'm not gonna force my child to be here if they're physiologically, biologically not ready. And
Yeah.
because we were talking about that, me and my friend, she's like, well, what if you are having a miscarriage, or what about that? And I was like, well, I think I'm actually okay with that. If it, obviously it would be painful for something like that to happen, and sad, but I'm not scared of death anymore like I used to be. And so
Yeah.
yeah, then all of a sudden, like 2 days later, the leaking stopped because it had gone for like a week and it stopped. And then I have been learning about this thing called like German new medicine and things. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay,
I
well,
love that.
yeah. So I was like, it's something in my psyche that I
Yep.
have to. And then I was like telling my body, I was like, okay, body, like I know you're intelligent. And if there is something going on with my baby sac, like obviously it will either heal or whatever. Like you're not dumb. And instead of stressing over it, I'm just gonna relax and accept what's going on for now. And then all of a sudden it stopped. So I was like, oh, that's nice. Like, thank you, God, for that, whatever that was. And it just after that, I haven't been feeling any type of doubt or anything like that. I've just been kind of riding through my pregnancy.
I
And
love
I'm
that. I love
excited.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's such a learning experience, or actually more like an unlearning
Yeah,
experience
exactly.
because
Yeah.
we're so programmed to actually fear our own bodies. And I love that you
Mm-hmm.
brought up German new medicine because love that like healing framework. And I think that Dr. Hammer discovered some pretty incredible things about the way that our bodies work and that we're self-healing. And so when we're constantly outsourcing for something to happen within us, it's like we're literally telling ourselves and our body, like on a subconscious level, that we do not trust, that we
Mm-hmm.
are not, we don't have faith in our ability. And just that
Yeah.
in and of itself is, you know, detrimental to our health.
Yeah.
Like what we
Yeah.
believe about our bodies really does to some extent make up how we experience living in our bodies.
Yeah.
And so to have a wild pregnancy and, or I know people call it wild pregnancy, whatever you want to call it, but just trusting your body, trusting God's design and being able to leave the lines of communication between you, your body, and God open at all times. It's a gift that's given to us, but because of all of the deep conditioning and programming that takes place in our society, so many people
Yeah.
miss out on that freedom that we're all given by God. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, So
Yeah, it was
beautiful.
just it's been so
It's so
amazing to
beautiful.
experience. Yeah, and I even realized, like, like you're saying, the programming, so the society programming, like, I had realized that I hadn't even crossed over into being a mother yet. Like, I had children, but I didn't feel like a mother. I still felt very much like a maiden, and I was at 24. I had, my three children, and I was just still like struggling with like wanting to be a maiden, and like, oh, I didn't have freedom, and I want to do this and that I used to do when
Hmm.
I was a teenager. And I realized, like, wow, like that initiation of motherhood is really taken away from us when we go and birth under somebody else's authority, and
Yep.
we don't even realize that. And that's why we have you know so many women that are just not happy with themselves, or that they're not happy that they're mothers, or that, you know to take care of the home, or like they, you know what I mean, like just the whole
Yeah.
society thing with that, and looking down on mothers that are um in their mother spirit, and they're taking care of their babies, and they're proud of that. They're looked down upon, and they're like, oh, you serve your husband, things like that. And now I'm just like, how is that? It's crazy to me. it's
Yeah.
it's not even it's not even crazy anymore. It's
It's
just like,
so
wow, like,
twisted.
yeah, it's interesting, and it's just so nice, feeling just free. And that's one thing that I always wanted to attain, was just to feel freedom from all of the voices, always, somebody always telling you what to do, somebody always telling you
Hmm.
can or can't. And now I don't have that above me. I'm the authority. I'm the mother in my home. I say what goes, and I
Yeah.
allow or create. And it's a very beautiful thing. And it helps my marriage. It helps, me being a more conscious mother. And yeah,
Mm.
I don't know, I really wish that one day all women can experience that, and that we
Yeah.
lose the fear of its birth. It's like riding our car every day is more dangerous than giving
Yep.
birth. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a normal yet amazingly beautiful experience that we're all able to experience.
yeah,
It's just, choosing it. And you
yeah,
chose that for yourself and your family. And what a beautiful
thank
journey.
you.
And thank you so much for ex just sharing all of that. Um, and I'm so excited to hear about your ex birthday.
Yeah, yeah, it's really exciting. I haven't really even been worried about like buying
Hello.
things, or like, can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, the lost.
It's okay. Yeah, I'm just, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm just excited to experience it once again. And
I
um
think that
can you hear me now?
yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just
The
excited
last thing I heard was you're just excited to
yeah.
experience.
Yeah. I haven't really even been buying a bunch of things to prepare. I pretty much already have what I need, and I'm not really anxious about. I haven't even really bought anything for the baby. Um like, the baby usually lives naked on me for like weeks anyway, so
Yeah, and you realize how much you don't need. Like
yeah.
it's so much of it just comes from inside, and it's
Yeah.
so much more simple than we make it seem.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember with my first baby, it was like I felt like I needed all the contraptions that they were trying to sell to me. And now I'm like, I just need a couple blankets and whatever I'm gonna need for postpartum, and that's really it. And my teas and my yeah. And so my RBK friend, she's gonna come and, help nourish me and take care of me after. And I have a lot of homeschool friends now, and they're
Oh,
excited to take care of me. So So yeah, it's this is attainable for anyone. Like this isn't
I
something
love
like
that.
I feel like people are like, "Oh, you got lucky. You get lucky if you have a village." No, like work to create that village. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can create your reality. You don't have to sit there and be like in victim mindset like, "Oh, well, I can't attain that," or, like yes, you can. You can find it and you can attain it. And
Yeah.
I'm not a rich person. I don't have a bunch of access to this or that. Like I am just like everyone else and I still attained what I needed. Um and we have God. Like that's really the only thing you need. Like everything you need is within you and you've got God, and
Hmm.
you don't need all the fancy things or programs or you don't really, yeah, you can attain it. So that's something that I've
Yeah.
learned through the
Amen.
process.
Amen.
Yeah. Did we get
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, how can everyone find you and connect with you on social media and all of that?
um so I have my social media. um I have Instagram, and then I have some Facebook, but I don't really use that much. I have you could just type in my name on Instagram and it's like a yellow circle with a woman in the middle, like a teal lady. Um and it's
Hmm.
Oyuny Hagins. It's Oyuny, and then my last name is Hagins, and that's where I mostly post stuff about my business and birth. But there's a link there, and you could just I have a website. So yeah, because sometimes I post family stuff there and birth stuff. So yeah, that's pretty much how I can be reached. My phone is broken right now,
Awesome.
so
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you again for sharing your story. Honestly, this has been so incredible. And yeah, I'm excited to follow your pregnancy journey and hear about your next beautiful birth.
yeah, yeah, I'm really excited too. It's almost time.